Thank you all for joining us for today's workshop. Today's topic is strategies for graduate success applying to and thriving in graduate school. Joining us today is Dr. Kate Corrigan, Vice Provost for Graduate Education and Dean of the Graduate College. She's going to share with us what makes graduate school different from your undergraduate journey and share strategies to help you have a successful transition. You're also going to hear from graduate students and get a chance to ask them questions about their experience. So joining us today are Sion Melaku, Graduate Ambassador and student in Public Policy and Leadership, Christy Raw, Graduate Ambassador and a student in Criminal Justice, Rachel Glaze, Graduate Ambassador and student in Communication Studies, and Warren Forbes, Graduate Ambassador and student in Interdisciplinary Health Sciences. So we are going to start off by handing it over to Dr. Corrigan first to get us started.
Hello everyone, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today. Whether you're watching online live or watching later on YouTube, I hope this session is helpful to you. And I hope that it answers your key questions about what it means to go to graduate school. And if you're interested in doing so, how can you do it successfully? How can you apply and get in where you want to study and then make that transition a smooth and successful one as you enter your graduate career? So that's our goals for this workshop. I want to start by just asking you to take a few seconds and jot down the top 3 questions you have about graduate school and about graduate school admissions, right? So just think about what are the 3 things that you're hoping to get out of this session. And don't worry, I'm not going to call on you. I'm not going to make you share those. But for your own well-being and benefit of this workshop, let's pause for a second and think about the 3 things you really most want to know or need to learn. All right, so we'll come back to those. I'm going to try to be a mind reader and guess your questions and answer them along the way. And the ones that I don't get to, we're going to wrap up at the end. So there we go. So what is graduate school? Let's just start, as they say, at the very beginning and address the basic question. What is graduate school and why do we even ask the question? You're college students. Why would you have to ask what graduate school is? Well, the reason we have to ask the question is because graduate school is different in many ways than earning a bachelor's degree in college. So at a very basic level, graduate school is advanced educational study beyond your bachelor's degree. And that can take lots of different forms. You can earn a graduate certificate, which is short. It's generally somewhere between 12 and 18, usually not more than 30 credits. And it is just that. It's a certificate, not a full degree. But certificates are a really great way to take a few graduate classes, get your feet wet, test out an area, and at the same time get a credential for your resume that could help you on your career path. We, of course, also have master's programs. Master's programs are the next actual degree that you can earn beyond a master's degree. And there are lots of different types of master's programs and lots of different master's degrees. But in general, the master's is the first step, the first level of earning a graduate degree. And then you have something called terminal degrees. And terminal degrees are generally after your master's, not always, but generally. And terminal degrees are the highest degree in a field of expertise or study. And so doctoral degrees are generally, in most disciplines, the highest degree you can earn in that field. So doctoral degrees then take longer and there are more commitment than master's programs. They're also generally much more research intensive, and in the professional fields, they're much more hands-on so that you really come out being an expert. Think med school, for example. So there are different ways to attend graduate school and different credentials you can earn. Basically, though, all the graduate study focuses on developing in-depth expertise in a very particular field of study with a specific area of specialization. So if you're now, let's just say, a psychology major at the college level, to earn your bachelor's degree, you're going to earn a bachelor's in psychology like every other student in psychology at your university, right? The difference is in graduate school, you're going to earn, let's say, a master's or a PhD in psychology, but chances are it's going to be a specific area of psychology. And within that specific area of psychology, let's say experimental psychology, for example, there will be specific types of expertise within experimental psychology, and you will find a specific small niche, not even all experimental psychology, but a niche within experimental psychology where you become an expert. Okay, so as you advance into your master's, you're much more specialized than at the bachelor's level. At the doctoral level, you're even more specialized into a field of study than at the master's level. The other thing that's really notable about graduate school is instead of doing a kind of didactic mode of instruction, didactic being, most of your classes, you have professors or instructors who are teaching you, talking sort of at you. You might have discussion, of course, it might be a small class and it might be, more interactive, but generally at the undergraduate level, the instructor or professor has expertise, knowledge, wisdom that they're sort of imparting to you, and you're tested and evaluated on how well you absorb that knowledge, right? At the graduate level, the educational model is much more of what's called a mentorship model. And a mentorship model means that you have faculty and instructors who are experts in their field and who are now training you to join them as an expert in the field, right? So they're training you to be a peer. And so they become your scholarly and professional mentor. And so in graduate school, you spend a lot less time listening to other people's knowledge. And you spend a lot more time sort of engaging the knowledge that exists in your field and critiquing it and thinking about how and why it was created and what the big questions are in your areas of study. And then as a graduate student, particularly a doctoral student, it's upon you to develop answers to those questions. And so you're really, as you move to higher levels of graduate study, like the doctoral level, you're actually expected to create new knowledge, right? And that's the signal that you've become an expert in your field. At the master's level, that's true, but it's smaller because master's programs are shorter and less intense, and it's a sort of lower level of study. So you still have sort of more knowledge creation and more independent and critical thinking in the mentorship model for master's programs than you do for bachelor's. So now that you know what graduate school is, or at least a little bit about what it is and how it differs from a bachelor's program, let's talk a little bit about why you might want to go to graduate school and what that looks like. So when you have a bachelor's degree and you graduate and you enter your field, you're likely to enter in what might be called sort of technical positions. So you have a degree and you have some knowledge and expertise and you've earned it and it's going to feel great. Trust me, when you walk across that stage and you earn that bachelor's degree, it's an absolutely empowering and awesome moment and you've accomplished so much. So I don't mean to belittle that at all. What I do mean to say is that will slot you in or enter you in your profession or career at a sort of low mid-level or maybe a mid-level, depending on which area you work in. And so you tend to get more sort of technical positions, less leadership, less managerial positions, and certainly sort of lower level than your doctoral or master's colleagues would be getting. At the master's level, it's often in some fields the entry-level degree for certain kinds of jobs. So the more specialized you get those specialty jobs that are in high demand and that pay more. So we know that with a master's degree, you're more likely to enter at a higher rung in the ladder. You're more likely to take a leadership or managerial role, even if it's sort of mid-level, and you're more likely to take a sort of specialty niche position for which there's high demand and generally higher pay. At the doctoral level, whether it's a PhD or another form of doctoral degree, you have multiple pathways. One is to then work in academia. So to work in community college, but even more so four-year colleges, research universities like UNLV. You have the opportunity then to work on a campus and to do things like UC professors do. Research, scholarship, creative activity, student mentorship, and of course, teaching on college campuses. But only about half of our doctoral students in the US go on to teach in academia. The other half enter other kinds of positions, government jobs, private industry jobs, nonprofit jobs. So when doctoral credentialed folks enter the labor force outside of academia, of course they enter at a much higher level, right? In leadership positions, high level management positions, very specialized niche positions that require extensive knowledge and expertise in a very specific area. And that those kinds of positions, of course, tend to be, better jobs, if you will. So better benefits, better pay, likely more flexibility in your work life. So the more degrees you earn, the more decision-making, control, and management opportunities you have, right? And so what degrees you get will determine where you enter your field and how you progress. So on this, then why else should you go to graduate school? Well, I think it's really important to not focus on just career or just money. Those can be very hollow pursuits, although they can be valuable and they can be rewarding. At the same time, you have to also be in this for yourself. And when I say that, what I mean is you have to be somebody who's not done thinking. You still have things you want to learn, you're curious, you have questions you want to ask. You have to have a kind of natural curiosity or at least an interest in continued learning. Because if you enter grad school without that, and it's really just about money, it's going to fall flat for you. You're not going to have a great experience. It'll be hard to be successful, I think. And it'll be a kind of compromised experience. And I think it's harder for folks like that to make it through rigorous graduate programs. So you got to start with some motivation, like you like school and you don't want to enter the real world yet. I hear that a lot from students, right? It's not just that you want to learn more, it's that you really don't want to go get a job yet, right? So grad school is a good place to do that. You also have to be the kind of person who likes challenges and you like to earn accomplishments, right? If you're a gamer, you like leveling up. You want to gamify and keep going. You like the next challenge. You find it rewarding. Those things, those personality traits are really beneficial to help drive you through, the progressive steps you have to accomplish in graduate school. Oftentimes I hear from students, they want more career and professional options like we were just discussing, or they want, to more financial stability and job security. So they earn higher degrees. Those are very common motivators, I would say. But you should also know that having an advanced degree correlates positively with other significant life outcomes, not just for you, for your family, right? So we know that when people earn graduate degrees, they tend to be more civically engaged, so more involved in their community, they interact with more different types of people. They tend to vote at a higher rate and be engaged that way. And they tend to have better health and life outcomes. So they report higher levels of satisfaction and happiness. They tend to have better physical health outcomes, and longevity is in terms of life longevity. And so these benefits, tend to be conferred on folks who graduate from graduate school, but also it changes families because these benefits then pass on to children, the next generation, right, to the whole family. So there's a long-term sort of quality of life benefit that often comes with earning graduate degrees. The other reason to go to graduate school is you care, right? Do you care about something? Is there a problem that really irks you and you'd like to help solve? Is there a question that you really need to answer, not just for yourself, but because you think the answer is going to make, some group or some place or some part of the world better? Grad school is all about that, right? Because when you come to graduate school, you're not just learning other people's knowledge, you're creating your own, which means you're learning to ask the right questions, really incisive, good questions. You're going to learn the methodology to gather data and go through a process to answer those questions in a rigorous way. And then by doing so, you're creating new knowledge that makes a positive impact, not just on your field of study, although that too, but on the world beyond, right? So making an impact is, I think, a really important part of why you might want to consider going to graduate school. And when you come out, of course, you have a bigger microphone, right? You have a better chance of having people hear what you have to say and amplifying that impact. And then last but not least, like grad school is incredibly fun. You will meet people that you'll be friends with your entire life. You're going to have mentors that inspire you and change how you think. You are going to grow in ways that you can't even anticipate when you start. And at the end, you're going to look back and you won't be able to imagine what your life would have been without it, right? It's just that kind of transformative experience. Now, at the same time, you'll find challenges in grad school, for sure. I'm not painting a rosy picture. It's really hard work. You've got a lot of milestones to achieve to earn that degree. You don't get a degree, you earn it, for sure. But you do so with support of faculty and your cohort, the other students who are going through the program with you, and you come out with something that nobody can ever take away from you, right? That graduate degree that is yours. So I mentioned the financial piece, but let me just delve in a little closer. So not a lot of people have graduate degrees. So only about 33% or so of Americans have bachelor's degrees, 1 in 3-ish. And then only about 11% of Americans have master's degrees. And then when you get to that doctoral, that terminal degree level, we're looking at approximately 2%, might be just inching up towards 3% now, but you're really in sort of rarefied air. And this really helps to underscore how you become an expert who's going to end up being a leader in your field, right? There are very few people with the credentials that you will have, and that literally pays off. So as you can see on the slide, I don't want to read it all to you, but when I want to say 2 things. One is this data is a little bit dated. I think this federal data is something like 9 years old, 10 years old. So I keep checking to see if we have updated data, and I don't. But you still get a sense of the trend. Also, I will note up front, note the gender disparity at all levels of education, right? But for men with bachelor's degrees, they get about 900,000 across their lifetime, median earnings, higher than high school graduates. So bachelor's degrees pay off literally. But then at the graduate level, men with graduate degrees make about 1.5 million more in median lifetime earnings than high school graduates do. Right? That's pretty significant. For women, it was 630,000 more than high school students and 1.1 million more than high school students if you have a graduate degree. So when we talk about the financial benefits, they're not insignificant. Now, all of that's to say, if you're motivated, if you're curious, if you're excited at the prospect of staying in school or returning to school, if you have a career plan, or maybe you don't have a career plan, but you know you're interested in a particular area, and when you get that expertise, it's going to open doors to carve out a career plan, then grad school might just be for you, right? So if it is, let's assume you're interested. Let's talk through then, how can we help make you a successful applicant? Because it's challenging to be admitted to your bachelor's programs. It's far more challenging to get admitted to good graduate programs. Right? So let's walk through that process so that you have the knowledge you need to be successful. So let's start with the beginning, applying to graduate school. So most programs begin in the fall semester, right? So an August or September start date. Not all programs though. Some programs have multiple start dates per year. So some have a fall and a spring, or a fall, spring, summer. Some only enroll in summers for the new cohort year. So as with everything I share with you today, when you are shopping for programs and you're doing your online research, you have to read the websites very, very carefully to find out when the program even admits for. Check the websites, and when you do so, check the website for the program you're interested in, but also for the graduate college or the graduate school at that university. Oftentimes, you have to apply to both, or sometimes, as at UNLV, it's pretty common to have your application in the graduate school or graduate college, but you look to the department to get all the specific information about what's required to apply and about what the program is all about. So make sure to check both the department or program websites and the graduate school or graduate college websites for each university you're looking at. Now, when we say that programs often start in fall, you should know that that doesn't mean you start applying in June. because they start in August or September. Some fall programs start taking applications or have application deadlines as early as November or December of the year before. So this November and December, there will be hard deadlines for next fall's applications at many graduate programs around the country. Other programs will take applications on a rolling basis, meaning the application opens this fall for next fall's admission, and they'll look at those applications, as they come in on a regular basis into the spring. Others have a winter or spring deadline. So you just have to read those websites carefully. I would say most fall applications are due somewhere around February or March. That's, I think, probably the most typical kind of deadline schedule for fall admissions. The other thing you should know is you probably are familiar with the FAFSA, the federal application for student aid. And FAFSA is a free application. It's the free application for federal student aid. There it is. It's a free application that's available online. You can just Google FAFSA and you'll find it. And if you haven't submitted a FAFSA as an undergraduate, I'm going to encourage you to do so at the graduate level. Here's why. At the graduate level, there are no unsubsidized student loans, which means if you qualify for loans to help pay your cost of attendance, those are not subsidized by the federal government. Okay, so you'll pay interest sooner and longer on those. So you want to avoid those loans as much as possible. And so a lot of people think, hey, I don't want to take out unsubsidized, student loans, so I'm not going to submit the FAFSA. And that's a mistake. Why? Because the FAFSA is your gateway to other scholarships and other free funding from the university. So there's no guarantee that submitting a FAFSA will result in scholarship money. But I can guarantee you that if you don't submit a FAFSA, then if they have scholarship money to give out, you will not be in that pool. So put your FAFSA in, even if you don't want loans, because it's generally at most universities a gateway to be able to give out scholarships to students. Okay, so watch those FAFSA deadlines. They're generally in fall or early winter, and you want to make sure you make that FAFSA deadline far enough ahead of the semester that you're going to enroll. So when you're actually applying, some things are very similar to a bachelor's application and others are very different. Not surprising, right? Transcripts are very familiar. You had to send your high school transcripts when you applied to college, and now you're going to have to do the same thing with your graduate schools. Now, there's a difference between official and unofficial transcripts. Official transcripts are transcripts that come straight from your college or university to the school you're applying to. So they don't touch your hands and you don't see them, right? And they generally are either digital or they're mailed, right? It is possible for you to go to your college or university where you earn your bachelor's and pick up an official transcript. It'll be in a sealed envelope, and then you can hand it or mail it to the program that you're applying to your university of choice for your grad program. But if you do that, do not open the envelope. The sealed envelope or the direct transmittal from your bachelor's college to your graduate school is essential. That's what makes it an official transcript. Okay. Unofficial transcripts are just like what they sound like. You print them off online, you pick them up over at your registrar's office, you open the envelope and you're holding your transcripts. That makes them unofficial. The reason it matters is that most graduate schools now will have you apply and submit your unofficial transcripts. And then if you're admitted, they'll ask you to then send your official transcripts. So that just takes away, that way you don't have to send official transcripts to every school you apply to. It saves you money, it saves you time. But read the fine print carefully because some universities still require official transcripts at the point of application. So pay attention to when they need the transcripts and what kind they need. And then letters of recommendation. You probably heard about the letter of recommendation process, but there's a strategy. It's kind of an art and a science all at once. You need to plan ahead. So you should be thinking now about, it doesn't matter if you're a sophomore, a junior, a senior, it's never too early to start thinking about cultivating good relationships with your faculty so that you can ask them for recommendations. If you haven't done that and you're a senior and you want to go to grad school next fall, it's time to go to some office hours It's time to go visit some teachers whose classes you did really well in and who you really liked and were inspired by, and tell them they inspired you. Tell them how much you enjoyed your class. Talk about what you've learned and how you've used that knowledge since then, and tell them you're interested in graduate school and see if they'll write letters for you. So the key here is to give folks lots of time. Nobody wants a student to come and ask for a letter and say it's due in 3 days. All of the faculty, all the professors, all the instructors that you know are super, super busy. Just like you, they have really full jobs, they've got family and personal lives, right? And so they need some lead time. So the first thing to think about is try and build that relationship early if you can, so they know it's coming. Be very communicative about when it's happening and give them lots of time. In fact, you might even say, how much time would you like to be able to do this? So that's first. The other thing to know about letters of recommendation is that you'll likely be asked if you want to waive your rights to review. Now, waiving your rights to review means that you will not see the letters that are written about you. They'll go straight to the university, straight to your graduate program, and then they will bypass you. Now, you might think that's a very bad idea. Why would I do that, right? Because if you waive your right to review, who knows what they'll say about you? You don't know if it's the strongest letter. I understand the nervousness about that. But let me tell you that it is extremely strategic to waive your rights to review. And the reason is, if two people apply and one waives their rights to review their letters and the other does not, the one who waived their rights to review, when we see those letters, we're going to know that that recommender genuinely means it, because they're not talking to the student. Their student's never going to see this. They can say anything they want and the student will not know, right? There's no pressure or awkwardness about being honest and hurting the student's feelings or having the student upset, etc. It's straight from the recommender to the university. So those have more weight, right? We trust those more. If, on the other hand, this other student has a glowing review, but they didn't waive their right to review, we know that they're seeing the letter also. And the person who wrote the letter knows that the student wanted to see it. You're going to weigh the letter a little less strongly. Why? Because it might be a great letter, but you can't be certain that the person wrote a great letter because the student's going to see it, or because it's genuinely true. So, general best practice in most situations, there might be some exceptions. If you have a special circumstance, it might be worth thinking through, and I'd be happy to answer specific questions. Generally speaking, most people should waive your right to review. And then we have GRE, LSAT, MCAT, all the alphabet soup of standardized tests. Now, the good news, if there's any good news during this pandemic, the good news is that the pandemic meant that it was really hard for people to do their standardized tests, right? And the in-person on-site testing had to be paused for many, many months. They moved to online testing. And as a result, many colleges and universities pushed pause on standardized testing. Many of those universities are doing what's called Grexit, GRE exit. And the GRE exit is just what it sounds like. They're not going back to requiring standardized tests. But there are lots of other programs who still want the standardized tests submitted. So if you are applying to a program that requires standardized tests and still requires them post-pandemic, plan ahead, do all the same things we've been talking about. Figure out your timing, save your money to be able to pay for the test, right? Make sure to leave yourself enough time to retake tests if possible. If the first score isn't as good as you need or you'd like, got to have time to take a second one before your applications are due and your grades, your GRE scores are due. So look at the timeline, plan for the cost, and most importantly, don't go in cold. I don't care if you're brilliant. I don't care if you have straight A's. Nobody should go into a standardized test without studying the test. What I mean by that is not so much even the content, but the test. When should you guess and when should you leave it blank? Which sections should you do first and which ones should you save till the end because they're worth less? So these are the strategies that differentiate people who do okay and do great, right? People who know what the test is about and what the strategy is to do your best job on the test. So, go online, purchase the actual, study guides if you need to, take a class if you can afford to, but definitely make sure you know the strategy of the test you're taking before you sit for the first one. Okay. Now, if you're an international student, you have some additional testing to do. All of the alphabet soup that you see there, the TOEFL, the MTELT, the IELTS, all of those are English language tests. So if you're going to a US university and you are an international applicant, chances are you'll be required to submit some sort of English language test to make sure that your written skills, your communication, your speaking skills, and your comprehension skills are sufficient to have you be successful in graduate school. Those vary by program, so be sure to look when you're looking at the admissions requirements. If you're an international student, be sure to look at the specific directions for international applications. The other thing about that is many international transcripts require transcript review. So if you're a US student who did study abroad and you have transcripts from a non-US university that you want to use or on your transcript, if you're an international student with a degree out of the US, then it's likely that you might be asked to send your official transcripts from those outside US institutions to what's called a transcript evaluation service. And the transcript evaluation services then do exactly what it sounds like. They evaluate those transcripts and they help the university you're applying to understand what skills and knowledge you have, what course equivalents you have, what your GPA translates to in the US. So if you're an international student, we do have an international admissions concierge in our graduate college. Her name is Lori. You can reach out to us and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer your questions. All right, so we're going to power on. Application information. So applicant fees, they're pricey. So at UNLV, we're pretty reasonable. US students pay $60 per program application. So if you're applying to 3 graduate programs at UNLV, it's $180. Okay, so it's $60 per program and $95 per program for international students. So this can help you decide how many programs to apply to, right? Chances are you don't have an endless budget. And so you have to be strategic about how many schools to apply to and how much they cost. So my best suggestion for you is as you're considering your graduate programs and doing all your online research, set up a spreadsheet, a Google sheet or something, and put all of, make the rows your programs that you're considering and make the columns all of these data points, right? When is the application due? How much is the application? Does it require a standardized test? What other application materials are required? How many letters of recommendation are required? A link to the website for the program so you have easy access to it. So make yourself just a simple spreadsheet to keep track of all of this information. Now, how do you know which schools to apply to? Well, much like when you are a bachelor student, it makes sense to apply to at least 1 or 2 schools that you feel pretty confident are your safe schools. Meaning, if you apply to these programs, you're likely to be accepted. And then it's a good idea to have, a push school or a handful of push schools. Maybe some that are close reaches, like you probably will get in, and maybe some that are your dream schools. Like I would love to go to this program and study with this faculty member if I could get in and get a graduate assistantship, right? So make a list for yourself. After you do your research, rank them. These are the schools you're sure to get into. These are the ones that are probable. And these are your real gold dream schools, right? And then pick a handful based on how much time you have, based on how much money you have, pick a combination of those to apply to. Now, how do you know if a program's good? Now, you might like their website. That's something. I will say if they have a terrible website with outdated information, that's a red flag. Right? It probably means the program, isn't great about communicating with students. So it's just one data point, but I would note it. From the website, you can certainly do what we all do, right? You find faculty members, you find their web pages, and you do a little stalking, right? And so you're going to read up on who the faculty are in the program. What is their niche? What is it that really gets them excited and makes them come to work every day? What kinds of classes do they teach and what kind of research do they do? That's what you want to know. And if you see a program and you love the sound of it, but when you look at the faculty webs pages, you don't see anybody that you say, hey, I want to study with that person. I want to know them. I want to read everything they've published. If you don't find that person, it might not be your program. But on the other hand, if you look at a web page for a program and you start looking at faculty and each one looks more interesting than the other, and they seem like really great people that align with your interests, and you start looking at some of the publications that they've put out, some articles, or look at a few books that they've written, and they really get you excited, like you really want to make time to read them, that's a great sign. Those are people that you probably would thrive with in this mentorship model in graduate school. So look at the faculty and their research interests, right? Look at what they've done. Are they accomplished in your field? The more accomplished they are, the more they're going to introduce you to accomplished people and help pave your way as you launch your career. You also have to look at things like their past successes. Are they funded? Are they getting grant money? Do they use that grant money to hire their students and help support their graduate students' education? Are they publishing? Where are their past advisees? Meaning graduate students that they've mentored and that have graduated, where did they go on to? What are they doing now? Are they successful? Right? Not one of these data points should tell you everything. Like you can't make the whole decision based on any one of these data points, but taken together, you'll get a pretty good sense of if a program is a good fit for you. The other opportunity to gather information here is to reach out. Reach out and email or call during office hours, the faculty members. Have a chat with them. Introduce yourself. I will tell you that applicants who the department already knows in a good way, like they know you not because you called and complained and you yelled about their stupid online application and how dumb it is that they still require the GRE, that's not going to help you. But if you reach out and you introduce yourself and you talk about a little bit about who you are and what your goals are and how you're interested in their program because, fill in the blank, because I'm super interested in that publication you wrote 5 years ago or that article you just published 6 months ago, you're going to get their attention. And then you're going to get information and they'll answer your questions. And then they'll remember you if you decide to apply when they sit down to make their decisions about who to admit. So reach out, right? The human touch is a valuable thing in this process. The other kind of folks you can reach out to are graduate students. So if you're at UNLV and you're looking at a graduate program at UNLV, you can probably find a graduate student or a handful of grad students that you can actually introduce yourself to. They might be teaching a lab or a class of yours or someone that you know. And ask them, what's your experience like in the department? Which faculty do you work with? What are the pros and cons? Would you enroll here again? Do you think you're going to graduate? All those things. So if you don't know any grad students, you might be able to reach out to some online because oftentimes graduate programs will put their graduate students' information on their website. So you can look at what they're doing, their research, etc. All of these are important data points as you shop for your graduate program. So grad school, as you can probably tell, is it's more about research and scholarship and professional and creative activities, depending on which kind of program you're in, than it is about classes, although you will definitely take classes. So that's why picking a program that has classes that are in topics that interest you, that have people that specialize in the area that you're interested in, that's why all these things are so important. So when you write your letter of interest, most programs will ask for a statement of purpose or a letter of interest or a letter of application. Doesn't matter what they call it. What they really want from you is an introduction. Who are you and why do you see yourself as a good fit for our program? What are your aspirations? What do you want to study in graduate school? And so you need to be able to talk about your interests, both generally, I'm interested in sociology. I'm concerned about social inequality, but then also specifically. So even if you're not 100% sure that you want to spend the whole time you're doing a doctoral degree studying one very specific type of social inequality, if it's something that has interested you and gotten you to this point of considering grad school, you should talk about that. So I'm interested, I'm a sociologist, I'm particularly interested in social inequality and its impact on different social groups. And I noticed that your department or program has faculty that specializes in race and ethnic inequality and gender inequality. And this really resonates with me because I had a class where I did a paper on, or because I read this really provocative article. So you don't have to write a whole paper, but a few sentences that describe who you are, and then what is your interest in the field that you've chosen, and then specifically in this department, so that they can see themselves in your letter and see that there's a connection. So I am a sociologist, and I ran our graduate program for many years. And so we would do all the applications every year and evaluate them and make our selections. And it was just really hard to see students who spent a lot of time and a lot of money applying to say things like, I'm passionate about sociology. Well, we gathered that you spent time and money applying to our graduate program. Being passionate isn't really a quality that's going to make you successful in graduate school, and it doesn't tell us what it is you're interested in. So those kinds of applications with the sort of effusively happy with no substance tend not to go forward, right? So avoid that trap. The other trap is people who say, I'm incredibly interested in studying global educational models and how different societies have different types of educational systems and how that impacts social stratification and inequality, right? Just what I'm asking for, right? A general statement, a specific example of what you want to study. What could be wrong? If we were all here together, I'd actually ask you that. What could be wrong with that? Let me tell you what's wrong with that. They didn't check the website. They did no research. We have 0 people who do sociology of education, 0 people who do global educational inequality or educational research. So it's great that they want to do this and that they know what they're interested in, but they spend time and energy applying to a program where we literally can't meet their educational needs, right? So as much as that student seemed like a great candidate, they also go in the no pile. So avoid the no pile by engaging these very simple strategies to write a robust letter. Of course, I think it comes up later. So what I was going to say is, of course, when you're writing your letter, make sure that it is extraordinarily well written. Flawless. I'm going to go out on a limb and say yes, flawless. Go to the writing center if you have to. Give it to a friend, 6 friends, give it to your parents, give it to your boss, give it to your mentor, give it to anyone you trust who has some basic reading and writing skills, and give it to multiple people, and give them a red pen, right? Or tell them to go ahead and edit it in your Google Doc so that you can see. But make sure you're not missing periods and punctuation. You don't have crazy commas all over. Make sure things are spelled correctly. These are the little details that will sink you in a competitive applicant pool, and most graduate programs have competitive applicant pools. So it's a little simple thing, but really taking time to literally dot your I's and cross your T's and get it right will pay off a great deal. So let's say that you're still interested in grad school. You have somewhat of a sense of what it's going to take to apply. Let's now talk about funding, because you're probably a little bit worried about money. And I'm here to tell you that this is sort of the good news part of the story of grad school. It's possible to go to grad school and not go into a lot of debt. In fact, it's possible to go to grad school and have your tuition paid and have a 20-hour-a-week stipend. And a stipend is just a paycheck for working X number of hours a week with a faculty member or a department in your field of study. So it's sort of a dream situation. We call those graduate assistantships. So there are lots of options. Before we get to GAs, there are also things like scholarships and fellowships. So just like at your bachelor's level, when you looked for scholarships that applied to you, hoping to get a little extra money. The same is available at the graduate level. So there are corporate and foundation scholarships. Do a lot of Googling, see if there's any organizations that you volunteered for, that your parents worked for, that you've worked for, or currently work for. Community organizations. Lots of times you'll find scholarship opportunities there. There are also nationally competitive awards. So these are very competitive national programs looking for the best and brightest students to fund them to be successful and financially well supported graduate students. So one of the most sort of high profile, competitive, but also prestigious awards comes from the NSF. That's the National Science Foundation. And it's called the Graduate Research Fellowship Program, the GRFPs. And so GRFPs, you can write a grant when you're in your late junior, senior year, or your first year of graduate school, not after that. And if you are successful, your GRFP will hand you a graduate assistantship. So a stipend, full tuition, benefits, and it'll say, here's your GRFP, take it to whatever program you want to go to. And if you apply to a program and say, I have a GRFP and I'd like to study in your program, it greatly enhances the chances that they're going to say yes, because you're clearly accomplished, you have a GRFP, and you're bringing your own funding. So it's a win-win. There are other examples that I would encourage you to Google to get more information about. Things like the Rose, the Marshall, the Mitchell scholarships, the Truman scholarships, Ford Foundation. There are lots of fellowship and scholarship opportunities, both as you're entering graduate school, but also pre-doctoral level and doctoral fellowships. So if you're in a doctoral program, as you progress, there will be opportunities to write grants to get money for the research you're doing for your dissertation, which is the document you need to produce to earn your doctoral degree. Now, cost of living is one of those tricky things that people forget about. So it's happened many, many times that a student will be telling me, great news, I got accepted to multiple graduate schools and I can't decide which one to go to. Okay, well, let's talk through it. Let's look at which ones are ranked the best. Right? Let's look at not just the ranking of the programs, let's look at the faculty fit. Let's look at the financial offers that they give you. And let's say the person says, well, I get, a graduate assistantship is going to pay me at all of these, and the faculty is great at all, 3 of these, and really there's no difference. Well, then the next question is, what's the cost of living and the quality of life in each of the places you'll study? And that's critically important, because if you're making $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a year as a graduate assistant, if you're making that in San Francisco, Oakland, Northern California, that is a dramatically different value than if you're making that in a smaller city or a smaller town with a lower cost of living. And so your quality of life is in part linked to, do you need a car? Do you not need a car if you live there? If you need a car, you need insurance. So you have to calculate that. What are the housing costs? Do a quick Google search. It's easy to find. Are there state income taxes? In Nevada, we don't pay state income tax. In other places, you might have income tax, right? So look at these kinds of cost of living calculations, and it's just one more data point to help you sift and sort which program and which admissions offer, because I believe in you, you're going to get accepted, right? Which admissions offer is the best fit for you. I know we already mentioned, but I'm going to say it again, do the FAFSA. And if you're not FAFSA eligible, if you happen to not be a US citizen or you don't have US papers, most universities have an alternate FAFSA. It's called different things at different places, but if you look at the financial aid website, you should be able to find it. Here at UNLV, we have something called the Alternate Need Form, the ANF. And the Alternate Need Form is essentially the FAFSA equivalent for non-US citizens or citizens who don't have paperwork. Okay? So either FAFSA or the Alternate Need or Alt-FAFSA form. Here's the graduate assistantships I was telling you about. So many graduate students, particularly in doc programs, but not exclusively, are funded as graduate assistants. Sometimes you're a GTA, and a GTA is a graduate teaching assistant. Sometimes you're a GRA, a graduate research assistant. Pretty self-explanatory. On the teaching assistant, you get paid to teach classes or to be a teaching assistant to a faculty member. Sometimes you run labs or you run, if you're in an art department, you might be running, studios. Research assistants are exactly what they sound like. They work as a research assistant doing research or scholarship or creative or professional activities with a faculty member. None of these are doing babysitting, dog walking, or yard work, no laundry runs, right? These are not clerical positions. These are positions where you're actually learning to do the skills of your discipline in your field. Now, what do you do if you get admitted, but you don't get a graduate assistantship? And it sort of depends on your field of study. So in some disciplines, very often STEM disciplines, it's more common for everyone to have a GA-ship. Okay? In other fields of study, it's more common for students to fund themselves. They might get employer help, they might be part-time, or they just might fund themselves full-time. So it really sort of depends. But having a graduate assistantship, it should weigh very heavily if you're deciding between multiple offers. Because with a graduate assistantship, again, it's going to cover your tuition and fees, often your health insurance also, and then you work up to 20 hours a week and you're paid for it, and you're doing the work of your discipline. And you're getting a great one-on-one mentorship opportunity, hands-on, in your field of study. So it's a win-win. Not having a graduate assistantship, you miss out on all of that, right? If you start a program because it really is the right fit and you really want to be there for whatever set of reasons, but they didn't give you an assistantship, it's okay. If you can afford to go, you can also then look for future assistantships. So we in the graduate college hire a whole bunch of GAs every year who do work with us. Lots of other non-academic programs on campus, non-academic offices hire GAs. So you get the full package and you do work in financial aid or student services or the graduate college or whatever. So look around campus beyond your discipline for graduate assistantship opportunities. Also, make it clear to your faculty advisor, to your graduate coordinator, that's the faculty member who usually runs the graduate program. Make it clear to them how interested you are in getting a graduate assistantship and ask what you can do to make yourself more competitive to try and get one of those positions in the future, right? So have those conversations as early as possible if you're considering accepting admission to a program without a graduate assistantship. Now, master's programs are a little bit different because master's programs at many universities, they have very few GA positions. Some universities see master's programs as really self-funded, and save their GA-ships for doctoral. So it varies by university. Here at UNLV, we do graduate assistantships at both master's and doc levels. About 50% of our doc students have graduate assistantships, and somewhat less, I would say maybe 25% or so of our master students have graduate assistantships. Let's see. How long does funding last? That's the other thing to consider when you have a graduate assistantship offer. So you've applied for your GA-ship and your admission. You're admitted, you accept your admission, you accept your graduate assistantship. There's a contract. And in that offer, that contract offer you get when they offer you the graduate assistantship, the fine print matters. So make sure to look at how much your GA pays, both your stipend and your tuition, fees, and health insurance, and then look at how many years it covers. So sometimes it says 1 year, but renewable if you perform well. Other times it says for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years or 2 years or whatever, so that you can understand what the commitment is that they're offering you. Generally, if you do a really good job as a GA and you're on that 1 year renewable, they generally renew, right? It's usually not a bait and switch just to get you to come and then they pull the GA-ship away. That's not something that commonly happens at all. But the length of the funding matters. And then also look for supplemental scholarships and fellowships. So here at UNLV, we have a ton of scholarships that we give out every year. We open the scholarship application every year on October 1st, and it's online, it's electronic, it's quick, and you submit it by December 1st. And then sometime in the winter or early spring, you'll find out if you were given any scholarships or fellowships for the next academic year. So that's pretty typical. Oftentimes departments will have scholarships, plus graduate schools or the graduate college will have scholarships. So search around each university you're interested in and make sure you find all the different places you should apply to be competitive for all of those little pools of money that are around on campuses. Now, there are some red flags, right? There are some things you definitely don't want to do. So as you're an undergraduate, if you're not in your last semester yet, obviously avoid things like low grades, especially in core required courses, and avoid putting off all of your required courses to the very end. It looks a little bit, questionable on your transcript. And B, the problem with that is if you put all the core required, like big important courses at the very end, you risk not doing well in them and not having any time to fix it, right? So take those early, do the best you can, work really hard to get the highest grade you can earn. And if you don't do well, repeat it. It's better to repeat it and fix a D grade than to leave it sitting there. But you don't want to have a lot of repeat grades on your transcript. It'll slow you down, take you longer to graduate, it'll cost you more. And it's a little bit of a red flag for admissions committees because we don't want to have students come to grad school and think you can do poorly, take it over. In grad school, we really want you to get you in, to train you well, give you all these great experiences, and then get you out in a timely manner. Right? So those things matter. Low standardized test scores, that's a red flag, obviously. So you're going to do those strategies we talked about earlier to avoid that. Poorly written statements, so with typos or grammatical errors or spelling errors, empty letters that are just all about enthusiasm but no concrete examples. You want to avoid those kinds of things. You also, if there's an interview or in your letter or when you reach out to talk to faculty or ask questions, you want to make sure that you are confident and professional, but neither sort of too shy and lacking in confidence, nor too know-it-all or cocky, right? There's a happy medium where you're there to learn and you're there to ask questions and you're there as a professional. What I always tell graduate students is, start your graduate program, start the application process now, being the professional that you hope to be in the future, because it starts in graduate school, right? So interact professionally, call people by their titles until they tell you not to, write professional emails, don't use acronyms in emails, all the simple little things you can do in your communications to come across as thoughtful, professional, and prepared to be successful in grad school. Now, one of the things that a lot of people are surprised about is creativity. You have to be creative. And you say, well, I don't have to be creative. I'm going to be a biologist or a chemist, right? I'm not going to be an artist or a musician. No. One of the things you have to know is that part of the fun of graduate school is you're asking questions and solving problems, no matter what field you're in. So there's that spark of creativity that you need and you need to find and you need to nurture, and that will help you be successful in grad school. And so, one of the red flags is to, meet someone, have an application, a statement of purpose, and then an interview with a candidate who comes across as completely not just not a critical thinker, but lacking in creativity. That's a little bit of a red flag. We want people who are curious, who are creative, who are eager, and who are professional. There's, some mistakes we've already talked about: weak letters, mistakes getting your recommendation lined up and getting a strong recommendation, being unprepared or unprofessional in admissions interviews. All of these things are avoidable. And now that you've thought about them and you've heard me say them, they're pretty self-evident, right? But now you're going to avoid them. And that's going to put you, head and shoulder above others. On the flip side, you really want to sell your positive attributes, right? So you want to create a series of positive things that work in your favor as you apply to graduate school. And you want to make sure that you share those out, again, in a professional and somewhat humble way, right? You don't want to be a braggadocio. You don't want to have a letter that's full of I'm the best, I always won, I've accomplished everything. That's the red flag, right? So you want to share this in a strategic way, but there's a series of things you can do and a series of attributes you can show that will make you a stronger candidate. First and foremost is research experience. So if you're in a field that does research or scholarship or professional or creative activity, all fields do one of those four, right? Find a way to get some of those experiences if you can as an undergraduate. Whether you go to that professor that you hope to get a letter from, somebody who's teaching a great class that you really like, and ask, are you working on something that I could assist with? Could I get some research experience with you? How can I volunteer? Or do you hire undergraduate student workers to work on your projects, right? There might be an Office of Undergraduate Research on your campus. There is here at UNLV. Go see them. Get involved. There might be a McNair Scholars Program that you might qualify to join. They pay you to do research with a faculty mentor in the McNair program. So there's lots of opportunities, but you really have to be proactive to find them and to raise your hand and say, I'd really like to do this. What would it take for me to get involved? Right? So when you do that, that goes in your letter, hands down, no question. It goes in your application. It goes on your resume. Get a letter from that person that you work with on your research or scholarship or creative or professional activity and have them talk about what you did and how you did, right? And that is the single best attribute you can have beyond the basics of good grades and good letters. As I mentioned earlier, show that you're passionate about the field of study you're interested in, but don't say it, right? Show it in the other things that you say. Creativity, curiosity, being a self-starter, a problem solver, being hardworking and professional, being reliable. You understand time management and how to prioritize projects. If you don't have those skills, now is the moment to take up the opportunity through the Office of Undergraduate Research, through the libraries here at UNLV, through the Graduate College, to take some workshops, join a program, and develop those skills. Learn how to manage your time. Learn how to prioritize work. Learn how to fight procrastination if that's the demon you wrestle with. If you're not confident in your writing skills, start going to the Writing Center now. It'll just boost your confidence and give you, again, that extra leg up. And we all have areas of weakness, right? So I don't say this to you presuming that you have things that you need to work on. I'm saying this certain that you do, because I do, because everyone I know does. Every graduate student who's ever been admitted and successfully earned a graduate degree had weaknesses. The difference is they persisted, right? They resisted the temptation to quit, and they sought out help to develop the skills they need to be successful. And you can too. And the sooner you start that, the better off you are and the more competitive of an applicant you'll be. We've talked about most of these as well. So I think I'm just going to keep going. And so, in summary, I would say I'm biased. I've been to grad school. I earned a master's and a doctoral degree. I loved it. It was hard. There were moments where I hated it. I think that's a pretty common experience. I went on to help run the graduate program in sociology and now to run the graduate college here. And so I'm admitting all of my biases up front. I clearly believe in the power of graduate education, but it's not for everybody. The key is if it feels like it might be for you, I'm urging you to pursue it, right? It's an amazing opportunity. It's a great life experience. You will come out of it stronger and better, and it will give you a pathway in life to do the kinds of things you want to do, whatever that might be, and to make a difference, right, along the way. So perform well as an undergraduate, try to get research experience, get to know faculty, cultivate good relationships to get strong letters, start writing your own letter early, do your research, start your application admissions spreadsheet to organize all your info and make good decisions. Figure it out and confidently pursue it, and you're going to do great. You're here. So this is an amazing first sign that you're already being proactive. So you are definitely on the right track. So that's about it. All I would say is go for it. And I am going to close on one quick word of warning, and it's on imposter syndrome. And I don't know if all of you know what that means, but imposter syndrome is the experience of having a voice in your head that tells you you're not good enough, that tells you this is too hard, or grad school is not for people like you, or that if you go to grad school and get in, they're going to find out you're an imposter. that you don't really belong there, that you're not good enough, that everybody else is better. That's what imposter syndrome is. And the reason it has a name as a syndrome is because it's not real. It feels very real, and it can disable you, right? It can stand in the way of your own personal achievement and satisfaction and success. But the voice isn't real, right? That's the voice of a culture that's taught us to keep ourselves down. And so, imposter syndrome is one of these things that we care a great deal about talking about in grad school, because we know how commonplace it is among graduate students. And my fear is it's even more commonplace among undergraduates, and it stops a lot of undergraduates from even daring to go on. And that breaks my heart, right? So what I want to say to you is, you're good enough, you're smart enough, you're here, you're ambitious, fight that voice. And there are resources to do so. Google it. There's some great articles. There's great tips about fighting imposter syndrome. Come talk to me. Come talk to one of my colleagues. We're all here to help you. So yeah, don't let the imposter voice win, and go for it. You got this. All right, I'm going to hand it back, I guess, to Nev.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
So for the rest of our time together today, we're going to take some questions. But before we start doing that, I just want to give our ambassadors a chance to introduce themselves. So I'm going to hand it over to Warren to go ahead and say about himself.
Hello, my name is Warren Forbes. I am in my second year in the PhD program in interdisciplinary health sciences.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Glaze, and I am a second-year master's student in the communication studies.
And Christy's joining us on WebEx. Do you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, Christy? Yes, Christy? Having some technical issues, so we'll just go ahead and start taking questions for now. So it looks like we already have a few questions in the chat, so I'll start with those. The first one is, how do I start the process to study and prepare for the GRE? I'm in my first semester of my junior year. That first?
Okay. Yeah, so I think that being in your first semester of your junior year is a really great time to start. I think you'd actually be getting a head start on that, I would think, at least from my personal experience. Something that I did was look online for free tests, free resources that are available. And then if you kind of want something a little bit more concrete, I purchased through Amazon the GRE like resource textbooks, which have some free tests available in those also. You might try the library here at UNLV. I think they might have some test taking tools. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree with that. I think what helped me, I purchased a GRE prep book. And as regard to the content of the GRE, one thing that I learned is it's all stuff that I have done previously. It's just I haven't done it for a while. So it's more so a matter of going back and reviewing something that you've probably done maybe back in high school. Really, it's the last time you've probably seen this stuff. So that's my best advice with regard to preparation for it. Take the time to like was already mentioned, look at what's offered out there for free. If you want to invest in a course like a prep course or a book to prep for, that's the best way to definitely go about with preparation for the GRE exam.
I want to add that we did recently post two workshops. One was about the GRE, the other one was about the GMAT. Those are going to be going up on our YouTube soon in case you missed them, but the speaker does kind of go over a few practice questions and talks you through the exam and how it's formatted. So if you're interested in that, that'll be up on the Graduate College YouTube channel. Another question is, do SU grades count?
Excellent question. So it depends on the program and the university. And all bets are sort of off during COVID. So if you got the SU before COVID, then you'll be able to look up either on the website or in what's called the graduate catalog of the programs you're interested in at the universities you're interested in to see if SU grades will count. Okay. during COVID, a lot of universities, UNLV included, gave an SU option in all classes or most all classes to students, which means we're also accepting COVID SUs for our applicants where we wouldn't have before. So it depends a lot on when you earned the SU grade, what the university says about those SU grades on your transcript, and what the requirements are at the school you're applying to. So those are the three things to look for to assess whether SU grades will count.
So our next question here is, if you're applying for multiple graduate schools, can you use the same letter from one professor, or do you need different letters for every application?
Great question. Should I grab it? Yes, you can use the same letter, but your professor will have to upload it to each, or email it, whatever the system is, to each of the application universities. And so one of two things happens. Either you need to ask your professor, let them know that, hey, you're going to be asked for these letters from 3, 4, 5 different schools. So please, you could feel free to make it non-specific. So detailed about me, but not to a specific university. Or they have the opportunity to personalize it. Some will do so. What you don't want is a super generic letter that's like, hey, Susie is great. She was in my class. She earned an A. I recommend her for admission. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that you're not telling them to write a generic letter, just to send it to each school, either with generic addresses, or they can personalize if they want.
So as we begin preparing for applications, how many months should we give ourselves for the process?
So in regards to an exact number of months, it's a little bit difficult to say because it kind of depends on where you're at in your collegiate academic career right now. But I think it's more important to understand what the deadlines are. I think you would want to finish everything at least a month or two before the deadlines, especially when it comes to preparing for a GRE. If you want to or need to take it twice, I think that's one of the most important things needed to take consideration. And also have my deadline January 18th. So yeah, definitely, I think it's great if you're starting now. I think you would ideally want to have everything ready by December, at least a month before, and give your professors an opportunity to write those letters of recommendation, or you give them ample time to be able to say everything they need and give them time to write that out and give you the best letter that you can, as well as finishing out your courses as best you can as well. If you want to finish with the highest GPA possible. So I think that you need to give yourself time to work on applications and be able to perform well in your classes as well to finish as best you can to be the most competitive applicant for these colleges you're applying to.
Out to a professor with the research we are interested in, does that professor have any say as far as our admission, or is it the admission committee independent from the department? Question.
Yes, and I realize this. So the admissions, every program does it differently. So oftentimes graduate programs will have an admissions committee, and that admissions committee will review and make recommendations. Generally, if there's an admissions committee, they're going to check with other faculty on the applicants, right? Or if a faculty member knows an applicant, they're going to mention it to their colleagues on the admissions committee, so that there's very rarely a very strict wall, if you will, between the admissions committee and the other faculty in a program. So it depends. Now, I will say in some fields of study, like for example, doctoral programs, where you're being admitted generally to study with 1 or 2 faculty members, right? They probably have just a few faculty members in your exact area of expertise. It's quite possible that they will only admit you if they have a faculty member who has expertise in your area and that faculty member says that they want to work with you. So if you're applying for, let's say, a STEM doctoral program, you need to be in touch with these faculty members in advance, so that they know you and they know that they want to work with you, because they're going to be asked by the admissions committee, right? If they don't know you or they have a bad impression of you, then it's unlikely the admissions committee will admit you if the faculty you would work with aren't willing or able to mentor you.
So this next one is for our ambassadors. What was something you wish you knew before starting grad school?
I think I'll go ahead and defer back to this idea of imposter syndrome. I think that that's definitely something that a lot of, I mean, for myself and my peers, we all deal with that every day. But I wish that I knew that it's not as difficult as people make it seem. And that might be a little bit, I don't know, arrogant, I guess, to say, but I think that everybody can do it. It's just a matter of wanting it that badly.
One thing that I wish I knew before grad school. For me, I wish it was about when I previously applied for my master's program. I wish I had gotten to know who I wanted to work with sooner. That way, I could have had a more when I got to grad school, more focused towards my exact field. I had a very broad idea of what I wanted to do, which was fine, and it eventually did work out for me. But I think that had I established a relationship with my faculty member sooner in my master's program, I could have tailored it more towards eventually going to the PhD program that I wanted to go to. So I think that it's important to, if you have an idea of what you want to do in your field, establishing those relationships with the faculty members so that you can they can know you ahead of time and then tailor your graduate career towards what you want to do after grad school, whether that be going into industry or into a PhD program. To have a better idea of that and help you towards your goals better. So that's what I wish I had known previously before applying to grad school.
A bit of a follow-up question is, what do you think is the biggest difference between grad school and undergrad?
I would say you have a lot more freedom. So that is where time management is very important. At least for my discipline, which is communication studies, it's very reading heavy. So I would say that's the biggest difference that I've noticed personally, because I also got my bachelor's in communication studies. You would maybe have 1 or 2 readings a week, maybe 3. And now you're reading 100, 200 pages a week. And so it's really important to kind of stay on top of that so you don't fall behind. And there's nobody kind of keeping you accountable aside from yourself. So I would say that's the biggest difference that I personally noticed in my field.
I think that time management is a huge thing. It's big in undergrad, and I think it's even bigger in graduate school. Also, along with time management, I personally found it easier in grad school to manage my time because the courses that I was taking were more relevant towards what I wanted to actually do. So I found it much more interesting to dive more into the research, go more into the literature and read things. Whereas in my undergrad, I was taking some GE course that didn't necessarily tie into my career. I wasn't really interested, so I found it more difficult to actually get more involved. So I fell behind in that way. So I actually generally, even though it was more difficult, I would say the course load is higher and there's much more that's asked of you to do. I found it more enjoyable in grad school because I knew that it tied in exactly to what I wanted to do as a career for myself.
I would second that too. And I think that a lot of graduate courses are more discussion centric. It's not just kind of listening to your professor lecture. I don't think I've had any like lectures studies thus far. So a lot of it is kind of to your point more like it's something that you really enjoy reading about, enjoy learning, and then you get to discuss it with your peers and kind of go from there. So yeah, while you are asked to do more, it is more enjoyable.
Both. So our next question in the chat is, how do you best recommend getting in touch with professors? Is it enough to simply email them?
So I think that it's a little bit different now in times where there's more virtual instruction and there's not as much face-to-face interaction. So I would say it is a bit more acceptable now, but I think it really depends on the circumstances. I think that if you have a professor as in an in-person class, I think that it's very important to establish that relationship in person as well as email on top of that. I think overall the best strategy when it comes to getting in contact with the professor for a letter of recommendation is making sure that professor knows you somehow, especially in an online course. You need to make sure somehow you stand out as more than just like a box on their screen that they're seeing. So taking that effort to maybe go into their virtual office hours or ask a question during class and let them know that you're paying attention in class, that you're more interested in more so than just the surface level knowledge in the class and standing out. So, I mean, as far as your question is email, is that enough? It really just, it kind of depends on, I guess, the course style. I think that in COVID, it could be, but if you are doing just an email, make sure that that professor knows who you are some way or another. That will distinguish you just from another gray box on their screen.
And also, if you're talking about a professor or a faculty member who you don't have, I suggest maybe emailing them or asking them about their office hours, and then asking if it's appropriate or if they have time to meet you during their office hours, because often those faculty members will just be sitting there waiting for somebody to come in. So if you don't have them and they do have a minute to discuss a grad program or maybe research opportunities in that time, I think that would show that you took initiative to kind of see what their schedule is like and be considerate of their time, and then also have that face-to-face opportunity. And yeah, oftentimes they'll say, I can meet via Zoom for my office hours. So people are more comfortable with doing that still. So.
And also, just to go off what both the ambassadors said, also you could let them know what your research interests are so that they could really put that in your letter, and also send them like a CV or a resume if they don't really know who you are, so that they could really highlight that in the letter as well.
So is there anything one can do besides undergrad research to help boost your application if you have had to retake more than one class? On that.
So besides undergrad research, I think that this applies to what depends on what you do in grad school. I think that if you have other besides recent hands-on application experience, like maybe internships, that could definitely be something that can boost your application if you have experience in the field as well. And regarding having to retake more than one class, I think that also kind of depends on what the class is. Again, this all depends on where you're applying to. I think there's a bit more leniency if it's a course that isn't one of your core courses. But I think that knowing that if you have had to retake a class, that you should be trying extra hard in your core courses to kind of show that, yes, I have made a mistake in this class. Maybe that was earlier on in my academic career, but as I progressed throughout my more upper division courses, I was able to apply myself, and then I use that even more in my hands-on experience in X field, whatever it is that you are working in, and that can make you a more valuable applicant because you have that experience in the classroom, maybe learning the theoretical side, and then using it in the field as an application side as well.
And I don't know entirely what the graduate committee for the department that you would be applying to would think, but I think that there is some grace given to students, especially I know like if it's your first year, if it's your freshman year of college and you get a D in a class. I think that a lot of the times, that committee will look at that and have like kind of a human, connection to it and say, okay, nobody's perfect. You're not going to have straight A's necessarily. It's great if you do, but realistically life happens, and maybe that's not possible. And I wouldn't worry too much about that. I mean, as long as you're really meeting that GPA criteria that they need, and you're showing initiative in all of those other application processes that you need to participate in, then I personally would agree.
Just to add one thing, and that is that's what your statement of purpose or your letter of intent, that's what it's for, right? It's to explain a little bit about who you are and where you've been, where you want to go next. And so that's a great opportunity if you have anomalies, right? And lots of people have anomalies through COVID, right? This has been in a global pandemic. All bets are off, right? And so if you've had, things happen in your life that have made it hard to stay enrolled in all your classes or to do as well as you'd like, or if you were out sick or had family issues, like you don't have to go into great detail, but your letter is an opportunity to explain anomalous, things on your transcript or in your record. people understand. You know, I think it's when it goes unacknowledged that it raises more questions. But if you acknowledge it and explain you've learned from it and moved and you've improved and you can give an example of how you've done that, that's really great. Or if you explain that this happened and it was really unfortunate, but it happened as a result of family issues that were beyond your control and that you had to go help with and then come back and your record improves after that, you know, people will understand. So use the letter as a tool to help address any blips in your application that you think might be better with a story.
Thank you. So we are at the end of our time together today, but before we do end today's session, we just really want to thank our speakers or panelists for joining us here today, sharing your experience, your background, and thank you to our participants for coming to join us and learn. Before you all log off, if you please don't mind taking a couple of minutes to fill out this workshop feedback survey. It helps us as we continue to provide workshops every semester, so we really do appreciate that. But other than that, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all so much.